Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, she did.
Okay, okay.
Ava, you want me to stop the banner? You want to put it up?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
Ma'am, shall we start accepting everyone? I think all
Yes,
are in.
please.
Yeah.
Yeah. All are in. Can we have the banner and the music, please?
Yes.
All the delegates will be starting shortly. The resource person is in a very senior meeting and she requested that she'll be joining in very shortly, next 5 to 8 minutes. So please be patient. Thank you.
Ma'am, I may admit everybody inside the meeting, right?
Kindly do so. Kindly do so.
Ma'am, Ava is not able to screen share because she's not the co-host. Ma'am?
Yeah, she has been made the co-host now. Yeah,
Yes,
you can
ma'am.
do it now. Thank you.
이거 어떻게 되고요? 그냥 혹시 마시고 되잖아. 뭐지? 왜 있어요? 아까.
ma'am, Swati ma'am, and all are in. Makar ma'am, Swati ma'am is in.
A very good morning. In fact, heading into afternoon. We are here to open the day for each one of us on a very important issue and a topic.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to cut you in between, but I guess Swati ma'am is trying to speak something and she is not able to hear us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Technical team.
Technical team.
Swati, are you
Swati,
in?
are you in? And you can
unmute it. I'll just help
unmute
you.
it. I'll
Okay.
just help you.
Right.
Unmute. Okay.
Right.
Right. Just a second.
Hi,
Swati, just
Swati,
making you the co-host.
Just making
in
you
a
the
moment.
co-host in a moment.
hi, can you hear me?
Absolutely
Absolutely clear. Absolutely clear.
Absolutely
Okay,
clear.
Because I wasn't.
Hear myself. That's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Is it
Is
good?
it good?
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Once again,
starting on this note
Ma'am, you'll have to unmute one of your devices.
of
Mute, sorry. Yeah, ma'am.
of a very happy morning. The Lala Lajpat Rai College of Commerce and Economics BAMMC department in its constant strive to bring to your attention sensitization programs, awareness programs, and many much more. Many of immersive ways of to know of issues and concerns. Today, we are going to focus on a very important issue, something regarding the topic's name is, we are calling it Code Red, and we call it the beginning of the end. Focusing on the IPCC report on climate change. We have with us a very eminent person, Miss Swati D'Souza, who's going to unfold and take us on the journey of what the world may hold for us with the threat that we have brought it to us for our own self by our own actions. If we do not revert and change and make drastic changes rather in our lifestyles, in our way we are consuming fuel and energy and many more such things, we're already facing the impact. So much of glaciers and so much of sudden dharamshala, what we Kasor, Kannauр, what we experienced across the country, across the globe. It has been very evident what we can see in future if we are not mindful of our actions. To take on this journey ahead and to know more about it, the impact and probably the causes, and also what we can do to hopefully revert the situation to a possible better environment that we can live and bring forth here. We have with us Miss Swati D'Souza, giving a brief of her introduction. Before the formal introduction, I would like to say Swati has been in association with Lala Lajpat Rai College of Commerce and Economics as a faculty before, as a visiting guest faculty, good many years back. And now she has moved on to a different arena, away from teaching faculty, away from media, but into a research component of something so important that she says she longed to do. And now currently she's associated with National Foundation for India, NFI, as a research lead in the area of climate change. She set up a climate change program with a focus specifically for the marginalized community and for the rural sectors. And she's already leading a project which is assessing the impact of jobs with a concern about coal transition, the ongoing coal transition. And she's leading that project and how it is going to impact and what are the implications of that. She also is a consultant with Brookings Institution India Center, again as a research lead on low carbon energy. She does an analysis on the impact of gas prices on the efficiency of gas powered power plants, cost of generation. She also has a more work to do at the potential for gas demand. What is the potential for the upcoming gas demand via the city gas distribution systems in India, and how it is both coming visibility can be projected. She is also the co-editor for the Next Stop, Natural Gas and India's Journey to a Clean Energy Future. She is in the end-to-end management from designing the book, and chapter narrative into more moderating, roundtable, editing chapters, and so on. And she has co-authored the policy roadmap and presented as the co-hosted MOPNG IEA webinar, which is a very, very reputed in the space. In the space of environment and climate change and coal energies. She's also been managing the specialists from key SEOs, private companies, bureaucrats, academic scholars, and the whole list is there. Apart from this, she's also the strategic partner engagement and relationship management, and she has initiated collaborations with ExxonMobil on natural gas research as a chief liaison with EM US and India, and led by Federica Berra, ex-VP acquisitions, and now the current SVP. Also, she has been as a chief liaison with Australia High Commission. She has hosted a roundtable for Matthew Canavan, Australian Minister for Resources, and she has led various discussions on how to increasing supply of Australian gas to India. She has also been on multiple high-level discussions with country leads regarding the energy of multilaterals on Indian energy policy. Apart from that, she has been a representative and in talks and given inputs in the Indian Oil and Gas to India IEA representative for the India 2020 Energy Policy Review. She is definitely a very resourceful lady, a person of multiple issues and concerns that she's put into hands with and worked effectively at various platforms. She's also been working with the Energy and Resource Institute, again, as a research lead on coal, gas, electricity, and climate risk. Very, very important aspects that we are going to look and understand from her, and how she's focusing on these various risk and energy supplies and climate transition. Taking and jumping ahead from a long, very, very long and amazing CV. I'm taking that she has been the project leads of over multiple crore projects, co-authored various books and financial implications of energy transition on the thermal power plant sector in India. She's also co-authored various research papers on these aspects, case studies, policy road mapping with the Punjab and Himachal Pradesh government for promoting hydropower. She's also co-authored a report on socioeconomic challenges to hydropower growth in Himachal Pradesh. And she was earlier working with ET Now as an assistant producer and reporter. And let me also share with you that she has a lot of collaborations and engagement with Government of India Ministry on the aspect of environment, forest, climate change, with various renowned secretaries like Mr. R.P. Gupta, Mr. Anuruddha Kumar, Joint Secretary, and working on projects of new renewable energy with Mr. Anand Kumar, the former secretary, coal, with, under the aspect of the coal with Mr. Anand, the ex-advisor, and the list is never ending. Swati, I have no words to tell you how kind of work you have progressed in. When years back you did a small stint with us in BAMMC as a visiting professor for the JPO subject, and now I see a different plethora of work that you have actually nosedived completely. So quickly narrowing down, she's written a lot of op-eds and articles, book chapters, policy briefs and papers, many media engagements in various capacities. And she has also been into roundtable conferences in London on methane, again, environment-related concerns, and much more. Bringing a halt to this in a very brief manner. This is a subject which is not very familiar with our students, with the faculties who have joined in here. And I'm very glad this could excite their thoughts and they want to learn further. So welcome to all the faculties, all the dear students, and the guest speaker for the day, Swati D'Souza. And without further ado, and taking too much time and giving a very brief peep into her work, I hand over the platform to Ms. Swati to take it further ahead and open the IPCC report, which is very alarming when I read it. And over to you now, Swati. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Makad. hearing my CV from someone else, it seems like I've done a lot of work, but I still haven't. So like there is a lot more to do. So I'm just going to get right into it. I wanted to get a sense of how you would, what is the level, explainer level, because I understand that it's a mix of faculty as well as students. So at certain places, I may use technical terms, which I will explain. But if there is any doubt, I'm happy to clarify this right at the end. With that, I'm actually going to share my screen so we can go through like a quick presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so so when Dr. Makad had reached out to me to speak about the IPCC report, which is right now on the forefront of all our minds, I thought, yes, we'll run through the report, but we'll also see what A, impact it has on India, and B, what importantly India and Indians, all of us together, can actually do to sort of mitigate some of the impacts that the report speaks of. So what are the key headlines that come out of the IPCC report? One, that it is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. Why this? If you go through the report, this is practically the first line that jumps out to you, and the word unequivocal is put there with utmost consideration. Why is that so? So the report that we are looking at today is the AR6, but before this, in 2014, right before the Paris Agreement, we had the AR5, and before that, about 5-7 years before that, we had the AR4 and AR3 and so on and so forth. In the AR4, 3 and 4, scientists were still ambivalent about the significance of human influence on global warming. If you look at the summary for policymakers that came out of from AR2 to AR3, you will see to it that there are hints that say that human contributions have led to global warming, but it is only from AR4 and AR5 that scientists started emphasizing on the fact that it was because of human contribution that global warming is happening. A very quick explainer. What exactly is global warming? Global warming is not, oh, today I woke up and today it's 40 degrees outside. Tomorrow I woke up and tomorrow it's 38 degrees. No, that's not what I mean by, that's not what global warming means. What it means is on an annual average, on a decadal average, what we're seeing is the temperatures have been going up steadily, particularly in since the 1980s. What do you mean by human influence? Now, because the IPCC report is a very political document, the summary report that is the most easiest to understand from the technical and the main report. Sorry, can someone's not on mute?
Yes, ma'am. Just a moment.
I'll just checking on that. Yeah, continue.
So the IPCC report is actually a very political document because while the report is made by scientists, what the key messages that come out of the report is basically negotiated line by line, word by word, by governments all over the world. So the language that you see in this particular slide has literally been negotiated. Until AR5, or rather until AR6, what was happening was governments across the world were not willing to accept the responsibility that global warming is because of humans. Therefore, the report could never, even while scientists were reasonably sure that it was because of human influence, the report could never come out and say it out upfront. AR5, AR4 to an extent, and AR5 was the first report that said this. Human influence is a very key word over here. What essentially they're talking about is fossil fuels, burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas, and all kinds of petroleum products and all kinds of different products that come out of processing these three primary fuels. But if you go through the report, again, you will not see fossil fuel burning anywhere in the entire report, because again, it's a very contested nature of topic. So the scale of recent changes across the climate system as a whole present are unprecedented over many centuries. I'll be explaining each of these sentences as we go forward, giving you examples. But if someone ends up asking you what is the major headlines that come out of the IPCC report, one, it's human influence that has led to global warming. Two, the scale and the nature is so unprecedented that sorry. So the scale and the nature.
Request, sorry, Swati.
Yeah.
May I request all the participants to ensure that you are muted? Please do that. Thank you.
Swati ma'am, request you to unmute now. We've muted all. Request you to unmute. Okay, just a second.
Okay, yeah, I think that's done. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Right. So first, it's because of human influence, that is fossil fuels burning. Second, the state of the climate, and by climate, I mean warming on land, acidification of the ocean, droughts, the tropical storms that we are seeing is so unprecedented that we've not seen this for many centuries. It's already affecting weather and climate extremes. So it naturally, we've seen that over the years, summers are getting hotter, summers are getting longer, winters are getting shorter, winters are getting very extreme. So what you're seeing is very extreme events. So it's either really hot summers, really cold winters. The balance in the atmosphere, the balance of the climate system has been falling drastically. And that is basically what we're seeing. Think about all the news that you've heard. I mean, I'm talking to the college as a whole, I understand, but also I'm reasonably sure there are many journalists, there are many students of BMM over here. So think about all the news that you've read in the recent past, over and above COVID, obviously. There's burning happening in California, there's burning happening in Europe. Right before the burning that was happening, the forest fires that were happening in Greece, there was floods happening in Germany and parts of Western Europe. Every year we hear of tropical hurricanes that batter the eastern coast, particularly from Florida upwards. Think about it in India. Has there been 1 year in the recent past when we've not seen extreme floods or droughts? It's always gone one or the other. There are very few years where India as a whole has seen normal monsoons. So this is what I mean by extreme climate and weather events. In fact, right a couple of days ago, there was snowfall happening in Brazil, something that has never happened through any of the years that humans remember. Again, an impact because of unprecedented carbon that is there in the atmosphere. Now, what does the report say? What is the fourth key point of the report? The fourth key point of the report is that no matter what we do right now, even if today we decide to cut from today, all countries as a whole decide that we will not burn a single ton of coal, a single barrel of oil, a single unit of natural gas. What is going to happen? Temperatures are still going to go up. They are still going to go up to about 1.5 degrees Celsius. We will hit 1.5 degrees by about mid 2030s. So between 2032 and 2035 is when we will hit 1.5 degrees Celsius. And most likely 2 degrees Celsius, we will also end up hitting 2 degrees Celsius. What is this 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius? Again, these are climate models, and what climate models have done is they've put up a threshold. After crossing a particular threshold in the global atmosphere, what ends up happening is it destabilizes the system around you. It makes it unlivable in many parts of the world. So 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees are the two temperature ranges under which humans, there will be drastic changes to our lifestyle, yes, but we will still, as a species, be able to mitigate and adapt to these changes. Beyond 2 degrees Celsius is where most of us are going to be in a very, very, very bad place. And I cannot emphasize how bad a place. So what is the next large headline that you have to think about? There is going to be a frequency and intensity of hot extremes, heat waves, heavy precipitation. What this basically tells you is events that were rare events, something that happened once in 10 years, something that happened once in 50 years. The frequency and intensity of it will go up. All of you are in Bombay. I am from Bombay. When was the last time you heard of a cyclone coming up Arabian Sea? I'm 33 and I've not heard it in 33 years of my life that a cyclone came up from the Arabian Sea. Yes, we've heard of cyclones on the eastern coast of India hitting Vishakhapatnam, which is why Vishakhapatnam has one of the best adaptation strategies for India. But Bombay doesn't. None of the western coast does, because the Arabian Sea was always considered to be a lot more calmer. But that's going to change going forward. Therefore, that's what they mean by when they say the frequency and the intensity of hot extremes will go up. Marine heat waves. What is happening is, because of warming, your oceans are getting warmer, which is leading to a lot of acidification in the ocean, by which it absorbs less carbon dioxide, and oxygen levels are basically dropping within the ocean. Arctic ice. So I'll come to the Arctic sea ice and the snow cover and the permafrost when I'm explaining these points. The next point. So what is something that's going to impact India in particular at a very extreme scale is water cycle. Anyway, northern India, if you end up seeing, our water tables are dropping to alarmingly low levels. Most of our farmers are reliant on the Indian monsoons, despite the improvements in irrigation system. So what's going to happen is it's going to intensify the variability of the monsoon. What do I mean by variability? By variability, I mean that when the monsoons hit India, what is the intensity by which it hits India? For 3 days, you may see rainfalls up to 200, 300 millimeters, and then nothing for the next 1 month. That's what I mean by the variability of the Indian monsoons. That's going to change drastically. And it's not just India, but everywhere in the tropics. And the tropics are extremely reliant on monsoons, like our entire body cycle, our agriculture cycle, the cycle of the plants and the species in the tropics is dependent, or has been dependent, on the monsoons, because that's how we've evolved over millennia. That's going to change drastically. So, and one of the last points, many changes due to past and future greenhouse emissions are irreversible. Now, yeah, if we succeed in limiting our emission, in limiting the global temperatures to 1.5 to 2 degrees, it's not as if changes are going to happen overnight. It's not. It's going to take years, centuries for your oceans, for the Antarctic and the Arctic ice sheets, as well as the global sea level, to reach a point where it was before 1850s. So it's all doomsday, I know, but this report is more about what's happening today. The next two reports, which are due out sometime this year and early next year, will talk about what we can do to mitigate some of these things. So I understand that some of you may have read that there's a lot of doom and gloom. It's not. We still have the time to change things, but we need to figure what is going to happen for us to start thinking about how do we go about changing things. So the first point, which is human influence, warmed atmosphere, land, etc., etc. What does this mean? This means that each of the last 4 decades, which is take from 1980s, each of the last 4 decades has been progressively warmer than any decade since 1850. If you can see the chart on the left, I'll explain what that means. What it means is, you see that steep spike, the left-hand side of the chart, the steep spike that you see, that's a decadal average. What it tells you is every decade temperatures have gone up without any signs of coming down. The maximum it has gone up is between 2000 and 2020. If you see a 4 decadal average, say between 1980 to 2020, temperatures have gone up by 1 degree. If you just see between 2000 and 2020, temperatures have gone up by 1.1 degrees. So in 20 years, we've basically gone up 0.1 degrees, despite everyone yelling hoarse that climate change is happening. What has that resulted in? That has basically resulted in warming of oceans, higher acidification level, decrease in oxygen. What does this do? This basically kills the plankton in the ocean. So if any of you have not visited the Great Barrier Reef in Australia or any or gone scuba diving, I would suggest you do it in the next couple of years, because very soon we will not have global reef in the world if the acidification continues at this rate and the oxygen levels keep dropping. So this is something that I put like a couple of points because it's very interesting. Remember the line that said that the scale of recent changes has not been seen in many centuries. The last time CO2 levels were this high was about 2 million years ago. That was when humans, not modern humans, not Homo sapiens, the first form of humans, migrated out of Africa into Asia. Go back to your history and think about it. So we as a species, the modern human as a species, has never lived in a world where CO2 levels are this high. Methane levels. What is methane? Methane is essentially when you end up burning natural gas or cattle, the bleaching by grass, it releases a lot of methane in the atmosphere. Now, why am I mentioning CO2 and why am I mentioning methane in particular? So there's something called global warming potential, which is how we quantify how temperatures have increased and how this will impact the surrounding world. So the global warming potential for CO2 is basically on a 100-year basis. So what this means is once you emit a ton of CO2, you burn a liter of petrol, you emit X tons of CO2 in the atmosphere. This CO2, if there is a higher level of CO2 already there in the atmosphere, it's going to take at least 1,000 years for this CO2 to actually get absorbed through natural processes. Which methane, so the warming of CO2 happens over 100 years, over 200 years. Methane, on the other hand, stays in the atmosphere only for 20 years. But the global warming potential of methane is at least 4 times that of CO2. So what it does is 1 ton of methane in the atmosphere will it's not a linear curve, it's an exponential curve, like it heats and then it drops suddenly. So the last time methane levels were this high was about 800,000 years. Again, modern humans appeared only around 200,000 years before. So think about the fact that none of us have seen what this high concentration of oxygen, of carbon dioxide and methane does to, forget plants, forget animals, to us as a species before we even think of anything else. Now, glaciers. Everyone who lives in northern India, all the rivers in northern India are actually fed by the glaciers. So you know the northern India, the Gangetic Plains is essentially the breadbasket for the entire country. Now, all of it is fed by glaciers melting in the Himalayas. What we've been seeing is that glaciers across the Arctic Sea, across Greenland, across the Antarctic West Sheet has been melting and retreating since the 1950s. This was not seen 2000, unprecedented again in at least 2000 years. What do I mean by retreating? So think about this as a cycle. What ends up happening during summer? Obviously, ice melts. But if you have a normal winter, there is an ice buildup. So whatever melting happens, that is accumulated again over winter. But if you have a mild winter, which means your ice will not form. So there is something, this is called summer ice. The melting that we see that feeds our rivers is called summer ice because it comes over 1 or 2 years and it goes away. But then there is something called winter ice. This is the ice that has been around for centuries, for millenniums. This is the permafrost that we are talking about. That is now starting to see melting going forward because the summer ice is not forming because winters are mild and summers are extremely hot, which then means that the permafrost and the winter ice that has been accumulated over centuries is starting to melt. And at this rate, if we go the 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius within 2050, the Arctic Sea will be completely ice-free by, well, closer to 2050. The Arctic Sea will be completely ice-free, which has again never been seen before, at least not in our history. Global sea levels have risen faster. Why is this particularly important to us? Remember our 750-kilometer long coastline, how most of our major cities are, barring Delhi, all of our major cities are located near these coastlines. The population density in these coastal cities are much higher. Expanding from India, almost all the major cities in the world are actually near coastline. So what's going to end up happening is you're going to see an increase in global sea level. 1 centimeter increase essentially means you have to come in by at least 10 to 20 kilometers into your land. And that's if there is no high tide, there is no monsoon. This is just normal 1 meter rise is what I'm talking about. So that's a problem. Now, again, oceans have warmed faster. Why oceans are important? Because a large part of our water cycle and the monsoons and the Gulf currents that actually heat and cool land are dependent on ocean temperatures. Now, what that means, oceans have warmed faster. Essentially something called the Atlantic, the Gulf Stream. If any of you has seen Finding Nemo, you remember the turtles that actually took the Gulf Stream and traveled across miles under the water? That's what is one of the Gulf Streams. So this Gulf Stream is made up of many different currents. The AMOC or the Atlantic current is just one of them. What this does is during when temperatures are warmer, it takes the water and goes to the north, therefore cooling the temperatures. When temperatures get colder in the north, it takes the cold water, comes down to the tropics, and it cools temperatures. Now, this cycle is going to change. What is that going to mean? That is going to mean warmer cities in northern in the northern hemisphere, which then is going to change our consumption patterns. So today, if you visit any European city or any North American city, which is, well, near New York, Washington, DC, the upper part is what I'm talking about. You will see wooden flooring. You will see the fact that there is no outlet for a fan. Increasingly over the last 3-4 years, heat waves have started battering all of these places to the extent that fans have started being sold out. In Delhi, a couple of years ago, there was a shortage of air purifiers during smog season. Very lovingly, we call October and February our smog season. So air purifiers had run out. Similarly, in Europe last year, fans had run out because it had gotten so hot, and the way houses were built is because to insulate, it was built out of wood. And what that basically ended up doing is that took temperatures within the households higher, which led to an increase in energy demand, which then had a circular effect because you start buying fans, you start buying ACs, so your immediate surrounding gets cool, but the hot air gets thrown outside, which then increases the something called the urban heat islanding effect, which then makes that particular area warmer, which again leads you to reduce your AC temperature just so that the room is cooler. So it's a circular economy at the end of the day. The next point, Dr. Makad, if you can you tell me when I'm hitting close to when I need to stop, just so that I'll have an idea. Okay, it's 12:30.
Absolutely.
So I have
Absolutely.
like 15 more minutes. Cool.
Thank you.
Hot extremes have become more frequent, more intense. Cold extremes have become less frequent. So there was a rumor in the 1970s, between 1960 and 1970, global temperatures actually dropped drastically. Okay. So everyone suddenly thought that by 2000, we will hit another ice age. So the scientists at that point started thinking that, oh, we are moving towards another ice age. But barring this aberration, temperatures have constantly increased. You've not seen a sudden cold wave that has come and impacted. Your cold waves have become less frequent, less severe, and even if they happen, for example, when Chicago is snowed in, that snowing in basically happens for 3 days. So all the snow that should have come between November to March now comes between December, January, with your November being warmer, your Feb, March being warmer. That's what it means when you say less frequent and less severe. Heat, on the other hand, has become longer, more frequent, more severe. Frequency and intensity. I'm from Bombay, you're from Bombay, you know floods. I mean, there's nothing, even like a small shower is enough. But think about the fact that you've been in Bombay, for example, and I'll give you Mumbai's example to explain this point. What
Ma'am, I'll
Swati,
request
we
you.
lost your voice.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem. If
Should
you're back,
I-
you're back. You're
Yeah.
almost just has 2 words left. That's okay.
Okay. So the frequency and intensity of rainfall. So think about Bombay. Bombay gets about 4 months of rainfall on an ideal monsoon, from June all the way to September, sometimes into October. Remember, I mean, I was in college. I don't know how many of you remember when floods had happened sometime in 2006. When we received something like 400 millimeters or something of rainfall in a day or in 2 days, the entire city came to a standstill. This was an unprecedented once in a decade event, but events like this are expected to continue, are expected to happen a lot more frequently. So the flooding that you see is expected to happen a lot more frequently. All your rainfall, for example, will come in June, or it may come in July, and then August and September will be no rains. Think of the impact that has on a farmer dependent on Indian monsoons, because your sowing season is geared towards the fact that monsoons happen between June and September. A lot of apples are cultivated because apples need colder temperature, because last year we didn't see enough cold temperature. Apples were impacted, the crop was entirely impacted, and then suddenly, when there was no snowfall expected in April, there was an unexpected snowfall, which then destroyed a lot of the crops that do not need snowfall or cold temperatures to grow. So these are the kind of changes that we will start seeing more frequently, rather than on a once in a decade basis. It will be more on an annual basis. Sorry, I don't know. My screen has stopped. Let me just reshare.
It's very much there. Oh, yeah, it just
No,
went a moment
I
back.
couldn't go to the next slide. So I'm just going to reshare my screen. Yeah, okay.
We can see that.
So now what does the report say? What are the possible emission futures? So the graph to your left will basically tell you there are 6 scenarios that scientists have put out through climate models. A very quick explainer on climate models. So these are essentially models that monitor the impact of energy consumption and carbon dioxide emissions on different aspects. So on oceans, you have a different set of models. On to measure the impact on land surface, you have a different set of models. To measure the impact on air, you have a different set of models. Forestry is different. All of these are basically hard linked or soft linked to come up with different scenarios going forward. The graph to your left basically tells you that what are the different, so scientists, what they did was they put together 6 different climate futures, which is SSP1, 1.2, 2, 3, 5, which is the 5 to 8.5. So SSP 1 to 1.9 is what will happen when temperatures go up, global temperatures go up between 1 to 1.9 degrees Celsius. The second scenario is 1 to 2.5 degrees Celsius. The third is 2 to 4.5 degrees. The fourth is 3 to 7 degrees, and the fifth is 5 to 8.5. Now discard the 5 to 8.5 degrees because the assumptions on those are still being discussed, negotiated within the scientific community itself. So discard that. The 1 to 1.9 degrees is highly optimistic. And let me tell you this, we are not reaching this. The most likely, given the current emissions trajectory, given the current consumption of fossil fuels that we are seeing, our most likely estimate is the SSP2, which is 2 to 4.5 degrees. That's the most likely benchmark that we are going to be hitting if and only if all countries decide to stop using fossil fuels by 2050. It's a very hard deadline. I personally don't think India is going to manage that deadline. Forget any other country. China has given a target of 2060. There are conversations that India may decide to go net zero, or rather stop burning all forms of fossil fuels by 2070. But again, nothing is decided right now. So based on that particular trajectory, we're seeing the SSP2 to 4.5. 4.5 degrees is basically your the global temperature as a whole rises to 4.5 degrees on at extremes. Remember when we speak about hot and cold extreme? So your extreme weather will see like 4.5 degree, your not so extreme weather will see 2 degrees, and then we will somewhere settle between 1.5, 2 and 2.7 within each decade. Okay, so the SSP3 scenario is, I mean, if today we decide, okay, we don't care about climate change, we don't care, we're still going to go ahead, or if whatever is negotiated takes time for implementation, SSP2 and SSP3 are where we will likely find ourselves. So SSP1 and SSP1 again are essentially very optimistic futures. The reason why they are modeled is to push policymakers to come to the negotiating table and start negotiating on the finer details of stopping to burn fossil fuels and carbon. So remember when I said, oh, it's going to get really hot? Look, so the first globe that you see left, first globe on top, the one right next to what is written, observed change per 1.5 degrees. So this is what we've seen today. The simulated change at 1.5 global degree is what is where the climate models start saying, okay, if this is going to be our warming trajectory, how does the globe change around us? So at 1.5 degree, we're still okay. The Arctic, we'll lose all the sea ice in the Arctic, but temperatures across the world are still reasonably okay. At 2 degrees, the Arctic gets really hot. You see India? India has a change at a regional level of about 2.5 to 3 degrees Celsius. think about it, we've just hit 1 degrees and you're already seeing the devastation that happens every year across India. So think about what's going to happen when we hit between 2.5 to 3 degrees Celsius. At 4 degrees, well, I may not be alive, but you and your children will definitely be alive. So that's not a world that anyone wants to live in, because that's a world where it's going to be almost impossible to survive going forward. Next, what happens to precipitation? Again, look at the simulated change at 1.5 degrees. The change in India it's going to get a little better, but it's fine. At 2 degrees, again, you'll see a lot more change. At 4 degrees, it's gone. The brown part of it is, by the way, desertification that ends up happening. You'll see in which the brown part essentially means that the Atlantic currents and the monsoons that would end up that would follow this trajectory will stop going forward. The intensity in change that you see in 2 and 4 degrees essentially means more extremes, but battering of extremes. So what you saw the cyclone this year in the Arabian Sea will start becoming a very normal feature going forward. And in fact, cyclones which have always happened on the west, on the eastern side, the eastern coast of India, will actually stop because rains will not reach there anymore, or whatever dust will be really less. So this is a sneak peek, okay, into the report is very technical. It goes into a lot of technical details. If you read it, it's very, very alarming for someone. For me, as a researcher in the energy field, it's extremely alarming. But the good news, or the silver lining in all of this, is the third report that actually deals with, okay, what can we do to prevent 1.5 degrees, to prevent 2 degrees, is going to be released. So that report focuses on mitigation and adaptation efforts. Very quickly, what is mitigation? What is adaptation? So climate change has 2 components. Mitigation is something that you do to stop something happening. So what are the steps you will take to stop the globe from going to 1.5 degrees? Adaptation is essentially, the globe is going to go to 1.5 degrees. So how do we then adapt to that future? What changes do we start bringing into our daily life, our systems, the energy systems around us, our daily life, the industry and the supply chain systems, to sort of adapt to a warmer temperature? So on the mitigation side of it is, everyone's been talking, and energy transition has been a huge conversation that has been going on for at least 2 decades now. So the globe wants to start looking at phasing out fossil fuels. Many countries across the world, particularly the global north, which is the developed countries, have come together to start saying that, oh, we're not going to, we're going to phase out coal by 2030. Some have given 2025 as the last date, some have given 2030, some have given 2040, some have given 2050. Now, it sounds very cool in other, that they're not going to burn coal. But something that we need to remember as developing country is these countries have been burning coal for over 2 centuries. And today coal is economically unviable for these countries. What I mean is, a unit of electricity by coal is about 4 rupees, 4 to say 7 to 8 rupees per unit, whereas a unit by natural gas, a unit of electricity from natural gas or from renewables, solar, wind, is about 3 to 4 rupees. This is hypothetical. So economically, it has become viable for many of these countries to phase out coal-fired generation. India it will slowly, India has reached a point in certain parts of the country where it is possible to phase out coal where it is possible to not put up not put up any new thermal power plants. We have a capacity of about 200 gigawatts of thermal power plants in the country. And we've reached a point where we don't necessarily have to put up any more new thermal power plants. Does it mean that we will end up phasing out coal? The grid has not yet reached that capacity where we will be able to phase out coal. But what it can do is it can consume less and less of coal-based generation going forward. Now that plan needs to accelerate. We need to start thinking all your planning documents on the coal side still look at an expansion even from an Indian perspective. Here is where it gets very interesting, because there are arguments to something called climate justice and economic growth. So India comes from, or rather in the last 1 or 2 years, India has come from a standpoint that we need energy to grow because we're still a developing country. And the world has used fossil fuels for its economic development and now is pushing India on a costlier pathway. This term I have explained this very simplistically, but this is one of the arguments of climate justice. Now, the other side to this debate is, yes, you need to grow. Yes, India needs to grow. But when climate extremes happen, we as citizens will continue to suffer. So we will grow, but at what cost will we grow? So to answer that, one of the ways that everyone is starting to, that many of the G20 countries are starting to incentivize India is through climate finance. Climate finance is a very contested topic because ideally, it's money that's flowing from the global north, so the OECD countries, to the global south, which is developing countries. But many of the OECD countries have not fulfilled the climate finance obligations that they should have fulfilled. So again, a very contested topic, and this is something that is going to see a lot of conversation in the COP going forward in November, actually. Adaptation. Remember, so read up, one of the suggestions I'll give you is read up on what Vishakhapatnam has done. So Vishakhapatnam and Orissa has been battered by cyclones for at least a decade now, 2 decades through my memory. Could be longer for those of us who've been, who remember, who've been around longer. So what Orissa has basically done is put in place a disaster management relief plan that immediately gears into action the moment they realize that a cyclone is coming. Tamil Nadu, again, a very critical example of the kind of measures that they've put in place to sort of combat the annual cyclones. This is adaptation strategy. Now, this is just one part of it. If we decide, and the report says that we will end up hitting 1.5 degrees before the temperatures come back down in the most optimistic scenario. So therefore, we start needing to think about changing our cropping patterns, changing the kind of food we grow, changing how we build our cities. Because right now, the way cities are built, it's easier for me in Delhi to take my car because the mode of transport is not very convenient. Bombay being linear, it's easier to take a train. But think about I know I have traveled by local trains and it's terrible to travel by local trains. So, therefore, we are seeing an increase in Ola and Uber traffic. Because these are not electrified, they lead to a carbon buildup. So we will have to look at behavioral changes, what we consume, how much we consume, lifestyle changes. Should we buy, can we start incentivizing a 5-star AC rather than a 3-star or a 2-star AC, because the amount of energy you consume will be less. So what are these different adaptation strategies that have to come about, not just from a physical geographical location, but also from a sectoral as well as an individual level? So these are some strategies that we need to start thinking about. what social, one of the main arguments that that center around climate justice is also the fact that whenever energy transitions have happened, the communities that depend on mining these fossil fuels are the ones that are impacted the most. Think of coal mining areas. Coal is not mined next to your house or my house. Coal is mined in rural areas, in a majority of which is Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Orissa. Those of you who are from any of these states will know the lifestyle change that you have seen after you moved to Bombay. The Bombay is polluted, Delhi is also polluted, but not as polluted as Singrauli. If you get out in the afternoon, and I visited Singrauli, if you get out in the afternoon in Singrauli, you cannot step outside on a summer afternoon because it's that bad, because not just the normal temperature, but also what ends up happening because of the thermal power plants running. Now, today, if you say, yes, we will shut down all of these, what do we do about all the people that are living here? They've lived here for generations upon generations. They've probably not benefited because of the coal that is being mined or the thermal power plants that have come into play. But their jobs and their livelihoods are dependent on these resources continuing to be mined and generated. So we need to think of an equitable strategy for these people going forward. On the regulatory side, of course, we have to look at governance. We have to think about how do we look at climate governance. For example, how do we integrate governance into our into different sectors, into the parliament, into the legislation? Can we strengthen regulations? Recently, so in 2016 actually, there were guidelines to strengthen air pollution norms for thermal power plants again. Some plants implemented it, others didn't. Case went to court, and now basically the courts have come back and said, oh, you get another 5 years or 6 years to enforce these regulations on air pollution. What has that done? That has basically taken the sector back to 10 years, back by 10 years, because these plants, some of the plants that have implemented, yes, have cleaned or emit relatively less emissions. Nothing is clean over here. But the ones that don't actually contribute to air pollution, which leads to bronchitis, which leads to asthma, which leads to deaths and heart attacks. There is extensive study on this. So you need to start enforcing these regulations irrespective of the cost that comes about. And then the last point is economic. Now, if you don't incentivize me as a consumer to buy a 5-star AC, I would rather go for a 3-star AC. And I'm just taking me as a hypothetical example. I would rather go for a 3-star AC because it's easy on my pockets, right? Any one of us would. Would you rather go in for a highly energy efficient car as compared to a car that fits your budget? So the idea is, how do we then incentivize people to, and not just people, even industry, to start shifting to cleaner energy, to start shifting to more energy efficient appliances? How do we incentivize to consume less electricity? There's something very, last example, and then I'm done with my presentation. There's something called, peak tariff, which basically means that when your demand is really high, your discoms, the distribution companies, will also charge you a lot more money to consume. What that does is that accordingly shifts your consumption pattern through the day. So if you realize, oh, between 8 and 9 in the morning, if I switch on my geyser, I'm paying 5 rupees per unit. But if I decide to take a bath the night before and not take a bath in the morning, then I will end up paying something like 2 rupees a unit. So you start changing your consumption pattern once there is incentive for you to change it. Otherwise, nobody is going to change it, because nobody is that altruistic at the end of the day. Let's be very clear. So you need incentives to do it. And that's something that that is happening. It's not that it's not happening. We just need to start scaling up. With that, I am going to stop here. So because I mean, energy, climate, very vast topic. So this was just like a brief explainer. Happy to take any questions if anyone has any questions.
I think, Swati, you have stunned everybody with the content that you shared, the implications, what we can expect, what's currently going and what is going to come forth. I think, including me, I can probably represent every thought. We are quite stunned. We did knew relatively peripheral information of global warming. And in fact, we have been combating with that thought that many countries and many informed people talk, there's no global warming. Now, there's another one school of thought which talks about those aspects. And here is something that's another dimension which scares us, really. And I think it's good to get scared so that we can perhaps start working. And the measures that you mentioned, whether it's Uber, Ola, or taking showers, such behavioral changes, of course, with incentives that definitely would compel people to move it faster. It has shaken us out of slumber, I guess. But at this moment, yes, the floor is open to questions. May I request our professor of BAMMC department, Professor Delavin Tarapur, to take it forward for the question answer session with Ms. Swati. Over to you, Delavin.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Good afternoon, all. I would like to keep the floor open. You can send in your questions in the chat box. Technical team requests you to kindly, yes, thank you, Ava. Technical team also requests you to kindly open the chat box for questions so that our audience can put in questions. I would like to first take a question, Swati ma'am, for you from Ava Naudar, our SYBAMMC student. Is it possible for climate changes to gradually cause a shift in land masses of the major continents as we know them?
No, that's tectonic plates. That's not climate change. I mean, that's Earth, atmosphere, etc., but not particularly related to climate. And even if that happens, that's like millennia down the line, because tectonic plates are anyways changing irrespective of what happens on top.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. And one question from my end, ma'am. Is there something as a farmers movement that we can undertake to raise awareness about climate change? Because when it's directly in question about our food, people will maybe become more aware faster rather than, calling it just climate change. Because I did pay attention of how our farmers suffer when it rains, when it shouldn't, and when it snows, when it shouldn't. So can we connect the dots? Can we have a fusion of the two?
So one of the latest trends in the climate field is actually climate communication and strategy, because a lot of if you just see even the summary for policymakers that the IPCC report has, it's very technical jargon. So what is happening is a lot of people who work in the sector and who are more interested in the advocacy and the communication side of it are actually simplifying this. So they come out with cartoons, for example, to just because reading a cartoon is so much more easier, right? And you get the context immediately. The other way to do it is raising awareness, yes, but you have to localize the awareness the way. So I do not want to toot my own horn, but when I was talking about floods and I was talking about how it impacts Bombay, now every one of us who lived in that city knows how bad it gets. So every time we talk about a certain thing, one of the strategy in climate communication is to localize that to the area or to the stakeholder that you're talking to. So if you're talking to a farmer, how do you communicate to him? Because he has seen climate, he has seen variations in rainfall through all the years that he's been farming, his father's been farming. So how do you communicate to him at his level that things are going to get worse progressively going forward? So that has to have like a multi-pronged approach.
Thank you, ma'am. And literally on that same note, we have a question from Miss Reshma, who is asking us that soon we have got news that there is going to be floods which will affect Mumbai and 2 other cities. How do we protect it?
Sorry, protect what?
The flooding that will affect, we've got news that there will be floods that will affect Mumbai
Yeah.
and other cities. How can we protect that?
Protect or prevent?
I think prevent is the right word. Correct. Prevent it.
So the thing is that you can't prevent it because the amount of rain that you get and Bombay's location, given that it's close to the sea, and during high tide, your water is going to come inside through the sewage lines. So you can't prevent it. Unfortunate as it sounds. What you can do is you can prepare for it. You can start building, your houses, your first couple of floors. The stilt at which you build your building sort of needs to come higher. So your ground floor needs to start from where ideally your first floor would start in the past. So you start with changing the way your city looks. You sort of decongest certain parts of the city. So it's urban planning to an extent. So you decongest certain parts of the city and push people out into the periphery. So it's not just one part of the city that bears on the load of the infrastructure. There are different ways to actually combat flooding. What you can do it through disaster relief, yes, but this is also like long-term city planning and how do you do this?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, we have a question from Komal Pandey. I have read a report in which it stated that according to scientists, Earth revolution is slowing down, which can result in more oxygen. Can that bring even a slight difference in climate change?
Has that report been peer reviewed? Has it been accepted? Has it been peer reviewed by more than 2 or 3 people? Have scientists and reviewers from across the world vetted the findings? I mean, a lot of people write a lot of things, to be quite honest. Until about 10-12 years ago, there were scientists who still said that global warming was not happening. So there is a lot of misinformation out there, and it's possible. I mean, I haven't seen that report, so I cannot comment on it. So it's possible that revolution will be stopping and all of that, but think about how much in the future that is. You and I will live for the next 70 years. Do you want to make your life livable and your children's life livable?
Very perfectly said. Ma'am, a question from our own student, Lohitaksh Samajiskar. I'm currently reading Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. He says, Earth's climate is at a constant flux. Can we say that a part of climate change is due to the same fluctuation or evolution?
Yes, Earth's climate is in a constant flux, but the level of human contribution to it has become so vast and unmanageable that your natural systems through which absorption could take place can no longer handle it. So yes, climate would have changed slowly, and that it's not constant. But the kind of drastic change that we are seeing is unprecedented, and that's because of human influence. And also because like natural systems cannot, like your oceans, for example, cannot take any more carbon dioxide into them. 1 ton of CO2, if I have to give it to the Amazon, it's going to take a tree its entire lifetime of, I think, 200 years or 300 years to manage 1 ton of oxygen. Think about that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You can see the level of enthusiasm and the level of interest our participants are showing by the kind of questions we are coming. I'll quickly take the next one by our Lala Lajpat Rai College professor, Ms. Vishakha Walia. For how long do you feel we can go on stretching our limits to accommodate the increasing demand of our changing lifestyle? Is it possible?
In all honesty, I don't think we can afford it I don't think we could afford it yesterday. That's how urgent this is. Because The problem is we've not yet come up with technologies that are commercially viable to capture carbon dioxide. So what should have, and by our lifestyle, let me be very clear, I'm talking about the global lifestyle. I'm not talking about just Indian lifestyle, because if you see it on a per capita basis, India's carbon emissions are not very high. Yes, on a cumulative basis, we may be the third highest emitter in the world, but given the sheer density and the size of our population and the fact that most Indians actually don't emit as much carbon dioxide. The the upper 5% of Indian emit similar tons of CO2 as a middle class person in US or in Europe. But that's barely like a 1 or 2% of our population. There's at least 90% of our population that actually does not emit as this much oxygen. What we can do is, or rather what we should do is, we should see that as we pursue economic development and uplift these people out of absolute poverty and then rise into the middle income bracket, or rather the government should, we as citizens as well as the government should put in measures to essentially see that they don't go down the path of carbon intensive lifestyles the way we sort of went down that path. In many ways, I think there needs to be a drastic cut in per capita global average emissions from countries across the world, despite commitments, and this is personal opinion, despite commitments that all countries have given that we are going to cut emissions, we are going to phase out coal. If you look at the global average and you compare it to the global south average, by global south, I mean India, I mean the entire South Asia, Africa, you compare that and you will see we don't actually end up emitting as much as the global north average. And this was the point that India actually kept up in August at the G20 meeting. This is the point that India basically asked all G20 ministers, because India was getting pressured to give a date to phase out coal, or at least peak coal consumption. And that's what India said, that you need to first bring down the global average per capita emissions, and then we will start thinking, and then let's go together and start thinking about net zero and cutting out of all emissions, etc., etc. So part of this is political, part of this is economic, part of this is social. Like, it depends where on the income level you are to institute that kind of lifestyle change.
Absolutely, ma'am. And sorry,
Bella,
ma'am.
I'd like to come in over here.
Yes, yes,
So,
ma'am.
Swati, you did talk about government and things like this. So, coming from you, could you share, though we understand per capita carbon footprints are much lesser for India as on a global scale, but howsoever, you did mention the floods that we are facing, unprecedented heat waves that we are facing, and so on and so forth within India. So is our political will there to take any measures, and are they thinking about it? Because it's quite scary to know that what we may expect in the next few years in Mumbai or other cities that we're already witness to. So is government working towards that, and India specific?
So there is political will for, so the question you asked, Dr. Makkad, is actually more on the, it's a mix between climate change and energy. Okay,
Right.
so there is political will on the climate change side, in the sense that we are strengthening disaster relief management efforts. We are coordinating with countries across the world to see what are the programs that they've come up with, what is the expertise that we can get. So, but on the energy side, we're facing a little bit of a dilemma, because we are not only increasing the capacities of renewable energy, but we're also increasing capacities of fossil fuels. So we've auctioned about 100 new coal mines, or rather are in the process of auctioning about 100 new coal mines. We are in the process of increasing the length of our the capacity of the city gas distribution network, which is the pipe natural gas that all of us get in our houses, to across the country, which means more gas consumption. there are plans to increase our refinery capacity from 250 million tons right now to about 400 million tons in the next 15 years. So yes, we are progressing on the renewable side of it, but we're also increasing fossil fuels. So there is political will to some extent, we could say that. But in all honesty, it's a little confusing.
Okay. Okay. So more it boils down to per person probably taking the behavioral changes to
No,
get
I mean,
set the
so
ball rolling.
no, so this is actually an argument that everyone that I mean, if any of us are on Twitter, we'll see the moment the report came out, everyone was like, "Oh, you need to
Yeah.
decrease your personal consumption." A person's personal consumption and therefore emission cannot and has never should not be compared to a sector or a company. ExxonMobil and Shell emits more than 100 people in your college can ever emit in their entire lifestyle. So you can personally say, oh, I will start using public transport, I will only have energy efficiency. But if the world around you, or rather the government, is not incentivizing the main players to change their strategy, then it doesn't make sense.
Correct. The higher volumes are coming from there. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you. That's quite an eye opener. Della, any more questions?
Yes,
there's a
ma'am,
message I'd like to read. Della, I don't know whether this direct message has come to me. I'll just read it out. It says by a professor, Mr. I'm just opening his name, but let me read out the message. It says, outstanding presentation, ma'am. We would request you to schedule another session that can stretch the topic a little longer and more briefly, something that our youth needs to understand and comply on our lifestyle. Would be glad to learn more about the same from you in the future ahead. And thank you so much for this amazing session.
Happy to do it, ma'am. Thank you so much, sir. Very happy to.
It's from Yusuf Belim, Mr. Sir Yusuf Belim. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Very happy to do this anytime. Dr. Makkad, you can reach out to me. We can do another explainer going forward.
Lovely. Thank you so very much. Over to you, Delaveet, for more questions.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, I think you've already answered this question right now while we were talking about public transport and how to address the main players in the market. Especially, a government needs to come up with, methods to handle these players. We have a question from Damini that says, with this virus going all around, I'm just paraphrasing what she's saying.
Yeah.
With this virus going around all the time, people are not taking the public transport and are forced to take out their private cars, own cars and all. Isn't that again going to aggravate the situation and make it worse?
In the short term, possibly, but I mean, once a larger section of the population is actually vaccinated, it's not economically feasible with petrol at 103 rupees to take out your own car every day. Unless, of course, it depends on your income bracket. But for most of the country, it's not economically feasible. So people will start going back to public transport. The main part is, can we electrify this public transport? Can we move the public transport away from petrol and natural gas and electrify? So Bombay has actually started electrifying some part of the bus fleet. Pune has about 300 bus fleets, 300 buses that are electric. Delhi is starting to do that. So it doesn't matter actually, even if you take out your car, if your car is electric. In all honesty, if you can afford an electric Nexon, and Nexon is one of the best models right now in the market, an electric Nexon is about 15 lakhs. If you are buying a top-end Brezza, you can afford a Nexon. Just saying. Because the price range is the same.
So we are seeing these electric buses now, especially the BST buses in Mumbai. More and more we have seen these electric buses. Ma'am, another question talking about electronic equipments by Sumanshu. What are the measures on which they give them the star ratings, that 5-star, 4 stars? On what basis, on what bracket? Is it just the electricity consumption, or is it also how they affect the environment?
No, so the star rating is actually done by Bureau of Energy Efficiency. It's a very long explainer. To answer your question, it's essentially based on the amount of units you consume. So a 5-star AC, for example, on an annual consumption, hypothetically, will consume 10 units of electricity. A 3-star AC will consume 15. A 1 or 2-star AC will consume 25 units of electricity. That's how the star rating system is done.
Oh, thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sorry I'm bombarding you with questions one after the other.
It's fun.
I have yet another question from Varun Patro, who asks, why are people still not believing in climate change?
Who are
Like
these
there's
people?
data and amount of studies and everything that and the environment around us is giving us hints about climate change, yet there are people who will argue against it. Why is that?
First, who are these people? Because after, I mean, 15 years ago, I could still imagine nobody believing it. It's very difficult to not do that today. But if there are people who still don't believe it, and that is actually possible because a lot of it is about how badly some messages are communicated, how badly they are interpreted. A lot of it rests on climate strategy. A lot of it rests on how you as an individual can, or you as a, I don't know if you are a student or a journalist or what your background is, but in case you decide to go into communications going forward, it would be incumbent upon you as a journalist or in the advertising space or in PR to sort of get that message across. A lot of that has not happened so far. My mother, okay, forget the world. My mother does not understand what climate change is. When the IPCC report came, I basically sat her down for an hour, and the way I'm talking to you, I was talking to her, saying, do you understand? This is what is going to happen. This is what is, and I had to literally break it down to something as similar. So I was explaining the impact of the Gulf Stream on the Indian monsoons. And my example was, imagine hot water, boiling hot water, and you put a mug of cold water and you see steam coming up. Now, that's what's been happening. Now, imagine room temperature water and you put extremely cold water. Do you see any steam coming up? No, it doesn't. Therefore, monsoon is being impacted. And that's when she understood. She was like, now I understand. So, we need to sort of break that down. A part of that is also on like people who work, people like me who use jargons for the simplicity of it, but it has to be a joint effort.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, a question from Mohammad Badar Bawani. If we move to e-vehicles, which is resulting lithium mining, which is also an issue, any inputs on that?
Yes, lithium mining is an issue, but in all honesty, there is the material is coming. Okay, so lithium, rare earth, a lot of it is found in China. Some reserves have been found now in Argentina, in Australia, as well as in Afghanistan. There is issue wherever there is mining, there is issue. Because companies want to mine it for as cheap as possible. Therefore, they don't pay labor. They keep labor in extremely inhuman conditions. And the problems also about the disposal of lithium ion once its usage is done, lithium batteries. These are issues that have not yet been dealt with because right now we are still exhorting the world to start shifting away from coal, oil, and gas. So some part of it is we've decided, many communities, countries, people have decided we will cross that bridge when we get closer to the bridge. Right now, we are literally on the other side of the road. So first we need to get to the bridge where we are like, okay, now we need to start worrying about lithium mining.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I think I'll just take a question or two more because we have too many questions coming in. For all the participants, in case your question is not answered. I'm sorry, there's some.
1 second.
Yes, ma'am. So in the meanwhile, no worries. In the meanwhile, ma'am, we have a question from, just a moment, please. We have a question from Omkar Surve. An electric car takes half an hour to charge compared to a normal petrol diesel, which happens like in a fraction of in fact, few minutes, in like few minutes. Are we like? Do you think that electric cars evolution may fail in the future because it is time consuming and people of today's generation are like those of instant coffee? They want everything now. There's no patience. So do you think adapting to this change will be a little difficult?
Electric cars, when somebody needs to mute because I can hear my own voice. Sorry. Electric cars used to take about 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours to charge earlier. Half an hour, we're like, oh yeah, technology is improved. Going forward, actually, there are also fast chargers. It's just that right now the technology is such that it wears down on your batteries, which is why people don't like. It's advisable not to go the fast charging way. But there are fast chargers that charge in like say 10 to 15 minutes. It can happen. In all honesty, this is where the lifestyle change comes in. Yes, petrol and diesel vehicles take less than a minute to fill, but that's also because you've not been incentivized to get out to in a petrol pump and roam around the petrol pump, because there's nothing to do in a petrol pump. But if you know that your car is going to take half an hour, then some entrepreneurial person will set up some entertainment for you to spend that half an hour, and then half an hour may become 1 hour. So that's the kind of like lifestyle change that a lot of EV charging infrastructure manufacturers and installers are looking at. So think about your Delhi, your Mumbai Lonavala Expressway, Mumbai Pune Expressway. Don't you anyways stop half an hour right before the expressway to go to the McDonald's? Don't you stop on the expressway to go to the McDonald's? Now, imagine if you end up having an EV charging station over there or a bunch of EV charging stations and you have a McDonald's next door. So, and I'm sorry, I know I took McDonald's. I'm reasonably sure nobody goes to a McDonald's anymore. I don't know what they're still doing in this country, but think like use McDonald's and put whatever else you want in its place.
Any entertainment, got your point. That's how we will be able to boost business at the same time, save time. Thank you so much, ma'am. I really appreciate the way you've answered so many questions. Apologies to a few participants who sent in the questions but could not answer it due to a time crunch. But definitely we shall, take down your questions, request you to email it to them, and we shall have Swati ma'am answer it and take it forward. Thank you so much, Swati ma'am, for your time and for answering all such questions with such insight, such powerful insights. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun. Thank
you. Over to Makkad ma'am.
Thank you, Delaveen. Thank you, Swati. That was very, very powerful session going on and so many insights being delivered. And I'm happy the kind of conversation that stimulated in the minds of the faculties as well as the students. And that's exactly the point of contention was when we wanted to do I will not call it a summit, but probably it's leading towards that. So may I request at this note, our student coordinator, Ms. Ava Navdar, to kindly present the vote of thanks to Ms. Swati D'Souza.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Today has been a real eye-opener for us, since we have the generation of today, the generation of tomorrow in the audience, and it becomes our duty to create a sustainable environment for the generations to come. A big thank you to our esteemed resource person, Ms. Swati D'Souza, ma'am, for taking the time out and patiently dissecting and explaining each and every aspect. It was truly valuable to have you here today, ma'am. Thank you once again. Our deepest gratitude to our two pillars of strength, support, and grace, our dynamic HOD of BAMMC department and the convener for today's event, Dr. Sangeeta Makkad ma'am, for constantly guiding us and nudging us to give our 100% every time, and our assistant HOD of the BAMMC department, Ms. Delaveen Tarapur ma'am, for being a constant source of encouragement. A big thank you to the student team for tirelessly working to ensure the smooth running of this webinar today. And it would be amiss if we didn't thank all the students and faculty members present in our audience today. Your curiosity and constant participation truly makes it worth every single time. The feedback form is posted in the chat box. Kindly fill it for your certificate of participation. And thank you once again and have a lovely day to all.
Thank you, Ava. May I also request Professor Delavin Tarbo to present a vote of thanks from the faculty department, set of faculties for our speaker, Swati D'Souza. Delavin.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Literally substantiating or just adding on to complementing our vote of thanks, I would like to extend a warm gratitude to our speaker today, resource person, Miss Swati D'Souza. A special thank you to our principal, Dr. Neelam Arora, and our vice principal of a self-finance course, Dr. Arun Pujari, sir, for all their support and constant strength and constant motivation. I would like to extend my gratitude and my thanks to our coordinator, then the convener of this event, who constantly keeps coming up with new ideas and we execute it like in a matter of a few days. That is Dr. Sangeeta Makkad, my lovely supporting faculties, and a student committee who are essentially the backbone of every event, without which all the minute integrities cannot be executed. You are a strength, you are a support system to all the students out here. And finally, last but not the least, the participants today who came in, took part and literally participated in the question answer round, asking so many questions, which just projects the level of interest we have for this topic and the level of interest that was cultivated by our very own speaker, Ms. D'Souza. Thank you so much for your time, ma'am. And thank you so much to all the participants for being here and showing your interest for the change that we need in the years to come. We need to work forward to this collectively. This is something we will have to do collectively. And these are one of our first starting steps.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much, Dr. Makkad.
Pleasure. I would like to put on record that for this event, we have a good number of states across the country joining, people joining from there, the faculties, mainly the faculties, and we have students from Maharashtra. The states that we have a lot of for participation are from Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, UP, Assam, and Tamil Nadu. So it definitely goes on to state the fact that this topic, this thought, this whole prophecy that we were trying to bring, and it's not a prophecy which is of fiction, but is a truth, a factual information. And I think we need to be very abreast with the factual, with the facts, and figure out ways and means. Though Swati did mention that it's supposed to be on a larger volume basis, more by the government and the bigger players, but nevertheless, still that also manifests. Let's, in our own capacity, in our own space, generate conversations, thoughts, such kind of connects where we can have people simulating these issues, which can further lead to not a deterioration.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. This was a lot of fun. Happy to do it again. I have to run for a meeting now.
I think I lost the...
Is it okay if I log out, ma'am? I have to run for a meeting now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Certainly. I think there's Makkad ma'am is just facing certain network issues.
Okay. I'll message her later.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Requesting all the thank you, ma'am. Requesting all the participants to kindly fill the feedback form and then exit the meeting, please. We have the feedback form posted in the chat box here. Please have the feedback form filled and only then exit the meeting. Thank you. The feedback form will help us give you the certificate. So please ensure the feedback form is filled.
Thank you. I think I
Thank you. I think I
dropped
dropped out.
out, but thank you for taking over, Beta.
Thank you for taking.
Oh, no problem, ma'am. Participants are requested to exit the meeting after they fill the feedback form. Please to exit the meeting after filling the feedback form. Thank you very much. We shall keep the feedback form and the meeting open for the next few minutes to enable you all to fill it up duly and exit the meeting. The form and meeting will be open for the next few minutes.
We have shared some content for the participants to read and think a little more deeply on the IPCC report. While you are filling the feedback form, you could probably deliberate on the thoughts which Swati very elucidly shared, read up on the content, and here's a small another thing that's being brought to you. So let's, oops. Dalivin, tell me when you can see this.
Yes, ma'am, I can see you.
Yeah.
I can see yes, I can see the YouTube video. Yes, ma'am.
Reeling under the adverse effects of global warming, the United Nations Climate Change Panel has now dropped a bombshell in its new report. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has projected the global temperatures to shoot up over the next 20 years. Inevitably, the Earth's temperature is expected to reach or mostly exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. The 42-page climate report is drafted by 234 scientists from 66 countries. And the combined warning now offers a hotter future. Even if a few countries manage to reach net zero emissions by 2050, the United Nations has named the report, quote-unquote, code red for humanity. This is a significant shift from the body's previous stance. Earlier, the UN Climate Panel shied away from blaming industrial activity. The report warned that temperatures will keep rising even after severe carbon emissions are cut. Extreme weather events will continue to take place, from flash floods to wildfires. Countries across the world will have to remain prepared. Studies show that severe heat waves have become common now. From once in every 50 years, heat waves are now happening once in 10 years. The report found that once in a decade, heavy rain events are now 1.3 times more likely to happen. Once in a decade, droughts could happen every 5 or 6 years. The report also warned that Arctic summers could soon be free of ice. The region is warming twice as fast as the global average, and the situation could turn grim by 2050. Sea levels will continue to rise. The trend may last for thousands of years. Sea levels have been rising due to melting of polar ice sheets. Calling for rapid methane cuts, the UN Climate Panel said that the world is running out of time to tackle the climate crisis. Countries are yet to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, which was adopted in 2015.
It is indisputable that human activities are causing climate change and making extreme weather events more frequent and severe. Second, it shows that climate change is affecting every region on our planet. And lastly, it explains that strong, rapid, sustained reductions in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions would be required to limit global warming.
Reactions have started pouring in. The UN chief Antonio Guterres said that there is irrefutable evidence that greenhouse gas emissions are choking our planet and that billions of people are in danger. The European Union also sounded more optimistic, saying that there was still time to prevent runaway climate change. It added that the world needed to act together and implement carbon net zero policies. Meanwhile, climate activist Greta Thunberg said that the report contained no real surprises and only confirmed what scientists have already been warning us about. She added that the world must take decisions based on scientific evidence to avoid the worst consequences. Greenpeace said that it was time for the governments to act and that the world cannot keep hitting the snooze button on action to stop climate catastrophe.
Scientists can publish these reports, but ultimately the action has to be led by governments. The G20, which is the world's biggest countries, have a commitment now, must have a commitment now, to cut emissions in half by 2030. A lot of these big countries, China, as I said, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Australia, they have not yet put more ambitious plans on the table as they agreed to do at Paris. They must now do this, and they must do this urgently.
Beyond World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.
Are you a finance professional or an accounting student?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Absolutely bang on video. Exactly addressing what we spoke about for this entire hour and more.
Absolutely right. And I hope it leaves an impact on each one of us to think further, to connect on such conversations. And probably, since a lot of the professors are from and the students are also connected to, in a way of creating changes in the authoritative manner, media students, non-media students, and professors. I think it's good if we can start narrative stories and blogs on this aspect, and probably lobby the government to incentivize and to create those measures which can arrest these kind of very fearful changes that we are expecting to come forth. I think even this webinar, if it strikes a note on that aspect, we would call it a huge measure of success for all of us. So at this note, a big thank you to one and all those who attended, those who took the time off to listen to this very serious conversation. We thought we must bring it to the notice and attention of environmental concerned people and not so concerned, and yet now who can embark on this journey of the issues about climate change. And let's hold hands and make this world to be a better place. Swati said, not for me, but maybe for the children, but why not for us as well? For us and our children and our generations to come. Let's put that small step ahead in the educational space by creating a lobby of thinkers and pushing the button for us all to stop and government to start for the collective action. At this note, thank you one and all. Thank you, Delavin, for all the beautiful way that you presented the question answer session, the vote of thanks. Thank you, Ava. Thank you, all the team, Loitaksh, Aram, Hunar, Benafsha, and all the other supporting team members who worked efficiently for this event to be a success. Thank you, all my dear colleagues from Lala Lajpat Rai College, from other colleges across the nation. And thank you all the dear students who were participant for this, I hope, an eye-opener event. Thank you, and we call the event closed. Thank you, one and all. I end the meeting now. I hope everybody's filled the feedback form. There was enough time on that. We exit the meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Benafsha, Awa and team, I hope you have taken geotag photos.
Yes, ma'am.
Benafsha, Awa and team, I hope you have taken the geotag photos of the event.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Awa responded yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Awa
Great.
responded yes.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we close the event for now.